When Amanda first brought it up, I thought she was joking. We were sitting in the living room on a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind of day where you just enjoy each other's company and let the world fade away. She was scrolling through her phone, smirking to herself, when she looked up and said, "Jake, what if we made an adult video?" I laughed, thinking it was some kind of offbeat humor. "Good one. What's next? We start a band too?" But she wasn't joking. "I'm serious," she said, her expression growing earnest. "This guy I know mentioned there's big money in it. He works for a site, and they're always looking for couples. Just one video, Jake. We'd never have to worry about money again." I froze. For a moment I wasn't sure if I'd heard her correctly. "Wait," I said, setting my coffee down. "A guy you know? Who is this guy, and why are you even talking to him about something like this?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Relax, he's just a contact. You know how I talk to all sorts of people for work. He mentioned it in passing, and it got me thinking. Why not? Why not?" I repeated, disbelief creeping into my voice. "Amanda, because it's insane, that's why. I'm your husband, not some actor for hire." "You're overreacting," she said with a roll of her eyes. "It's just a video. It's not like it means anything." "Well, it means something to me," I said firmly. "And the answer is no. End of discussion." She sighed heavily, like I was being unreasonable, and went back to scrolling through her phone. Over the next few days, Amanda didn't bring it up again, and I assumed that was the end of it. But there was something about her that seemed off. She was quieter, more distracted, always glued to her phone. One night, I caught her on a call in the kitchen. Her voice was low, almost whispering, and when I walked in, she quickly hung up. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Just Stacy," she said, not meeting my eyes. "She's going through some stuff." Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but something in her voice didn't sit right with me. Still, I pushed the thought aside. Paranoia wasn't going to help anyone. A few weeks later, I was going through some emails on our shared laptop when I noticed a folder on the desktop labeled Photo Shoot. Curious, I clicked on it, expecting to find pictures from Amanda's latest work project. Instead, I found videos. My heart dropped as I opened the first file. It was an amateur-style adult video, clearly shot in a cheap hotel room. At first, I didn't recognize the people on screen, but then my eyes caught something, a small, familiar mole on the woman's hip. Amanda's mole? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, trying to convince myself it wasn't her. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe I was imagining things. But as the video continued, there was no denying it. Her voice, her mannerisms, it was Amanda. She'd done exactly what she'd proposed, except she'd done it behind my back. Part 2, Betrayal on Film. I sat frozen in front of the laptop, the video playing out in horrifying detail. Amanda, my wife, was on the screen, doing things I couldn't unsee, with a man I didn't recognize. It felt like the walls of the room were closing in, the air thick with disbelief and fury. I paused the video and leaned back, staring at the screen. My hands were trembling, and my chest felt tight. This wasn't some misunderstanding or accident. She had made this choice. And the mole on her hip? That was my confirmation. My mind was racing. Questions swirled in my head, each one louder than the last. How could she do this to me? How long had she been planning it? And who the hell was the guy in the video? I wanted answers, but more than that, I wanted to smash the laptop and throw it out the window. But I didn't. Instead, I closed the video and stared at the desktop, noticing several more files in the folder. I hesitated before opening another one, not sure if I could stomach seeing more. But my anger outweighed my hesitation. The second video wasn't much different from the first. Same cheap hotel room, same setup. But this time, the man was someone else. My stomach turned as I realized this wasn't a one-time thing. Amanda hadn't just filmed a single video for a good price, like she'd suggested. She'd been doing this repeatedly. When Amanda came home later that evening, I was still sitting in the living room, the laptop closed but the folder burned into my mind. She breezed through the door, her usual confidence radiating, and set her bag down on the counter. "Hey," she said casually, kicking off her shoes. "What's for dinner?" I stared at her, my jaw clenched. "You tell me, Amanda. Or should I call one of your new co-stars and ask them?" Her face froze, her smile faltering. "What are you talking about?" I stood up, holding the laptop in my hand. "Don't play dumb. I found the videos. All of them." Her eyes widened, and for a moment she looked genuinely panicked. But she quickly recovered, her expression shifting to one of defiance. "You went through my stuff?" she asked, her voice sharp. "That's an invasion of privacy, Jake." "Privacy?" I barked, unable to contain my anger. "Are you seriously trying to lecture me about privacy after what you've done? Don't stand there and act like the victim, Amanda. I know what you did. I saw it." She crossed her arms, her tone defensive. "Look, you said no, and I didn't want to miss the opportunity. It's not like it meant anything, Jake. It's just work." "Just work?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You're my wife. You think you can just go to work by sleeping with other men on camera and call it a business decision?" Her expression hardened. "You don't understand. Do you know how much money those videos made? More than you make in months. I did this for us, Jake, for our future." "For us?" I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "You did this for yourself, Amanda. Don't stand there and insult me by pretending this was some noble sacrifice. You lied to me. You betrayed me." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up my hand, cutting her off. "And don't even try to turn this around on me," I said coldly. "You asked me to do this with you, and I said no. You knew how I felt, and you went behind my back anyway. This wasn't a mistake, Amanda. This was a choice. Your choice." For a moment, the room was silent except for the sound of her breathing. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing, and said, "Well, maybe if you weren't such a prude, I wouldn't have had to go behind your back." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Any hope I'd had for an apology, for some acknowledgement of the damage she'd done, vanished in an instant. "You really are unbelievable," I said, my voice low and steady. "But you know what? You've made one thing very clear." "What's that?" she asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "That I don't need to waste another second of my life with someone like you." After my last words, Amanda stood there in stunned silence. For a split second, I thought I saw regret flicker across her face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Instead, she folded her arms and scoffed. "You're being dramatic," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's not like I cheated. This was a business decision, Jake. You need to grow up." I felt my blood boil. "Not like you cheated?" I shot back. "You lied to me. You slept with other men, Amanda. You didn't just betray me, you made a complete mockery of our marriage. And you're calling it business?" She sighed heavily, like I was the unreasonable one. "Fine. I'll admit it wasn't ideal, but you were the one who refused to listen. You could have been part of this, Jake, but no, you had to be all moral about it." I stood there, staring at her, the person I thought I knew. The woman who'd stood by my side on our wedding day, promising loyalty and love, now looked like a stranger. "You know what, Amanda?" I said, my voice cold. "You're right. I could have been part of this. But thank God I wasn't, because now I can walk away knowing I didn't stoop to your level." She opened her mouth to reply, but I wasn't interested in hearing more excuses. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" she called after me. "Away from you," I said without looking back. I spent the night at Chris's place. When I showed up at his door, he didn't even ask questions. He just handed me a beer and said, "Talk when you're ready." I told him everything, the videos, the confrontation, Amanda's pathetic excuses. By the time I was done, Chris looked like he was ready to drive to my house and throw her out himself. She's unbelievable, he said, shaking his head. I mean, I always thought she was a little self-centered, but this is next level. Yeah, I said bitterly, staring at the label on my beer. And to think I spent 4 years building a life with her. Don't blame yourself, man, Chris said. She's the one who made those choices. But now it's up to you to decide what comes next. The next day, I went home, not because I wanted to see Amanda, but because I needed to make it clear where I stood. She was sitting on the couch when I walked in, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. Nice of you to come back, she said without looking up. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked past her and grabbed a suitcase from the closet. What are you doing? She asked, her voice sharp. Packing, I said flatly. I'm done, Amanda. You want to live your life like this? Fine. But I'm not going to be a part of it. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw real panic on her face. Wait, Jake, let's talk about this, she said, standing up. Talk? I laughed bitterly. You had plenty of chances to talk, Amanda. Instead, you chose lies and betrayal. I'm not wasting another second trying to fix something you've already destroyed. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. Jake, please, she said, her voice breaking. We can work through this. I'll stop the videos. I'll delete everything. Just don't leave. I looked at her, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the videos, the lies, and the complete lack of remorse she'd shown until now. You didn't care about us when you were filming those videos, I said quietly. Why should I care now? Her face crumpled, but I didn't stick around to watch her cry. Leaving Amanda sobbing in the living room should have felt satisfying, a clear signal that I was taking back control. But as I walked out the door with my suitcase in hand, I didn't feel relief. I felt empty. 4 years of marriage, countless memories, and promises we'd made to each other, all reduced to this. I drove to a hotel and checked in, ignoring the concerned glances from the receptionist as I fumbled with my credit card. Once I was in the room, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the suitcase I'd packed. It wasn't much, just a few clothes, my laptop, and a toothbrush. The basics. This was my life now, stripped down to essentials. The first few nights were tough. I couldn't stop replaying the confrontation in my head. Her excuses, her lack of accountability, the audacity to call it business. It all left a bitter taste in my mouth. I told myself I'd made the right decision. Staying would have been unbearable, and forgiving her? Impossible. But that didn't stop the questions from creeping in late at night. Had I missed the signs earlier? Could I have done something differently to prevent this? Or was Amanda always this selfish, and I'd just been blind to it? Chris came by the hotel a few days later with coffee and his usual bluntness. You look like crap, he said, handing me a cup. Thanks, I muttered, taking a sip. He sat down across from me, his expression uncharacteristically serious. Look, Jake, I know this sucks. And yeah, Amanda's the one who screwed up. But you can't let this eat you alive. She doesn't get to have that kind of power over you anymore. I know, I said quietly. It's just, I gave her everything, you know? And she threw it away like it meant nothing. Chris nodded. She's not worth your time, man. You deserve better. And now? You've got a clean slate. Use it. His words stuck with me as I started piecing my life back together. The first step was meeting with a divorce lawyer. I wanted to handle things quickly and cleanly, no drawn-out drama, no endless arguments. The lawyer, a sharp and no-nonsense woman named Heather, listened patiently as I explained the situation. You've got grounds for divorce, she said, her tone matter-of-fact. The videos alone are more than enough. We'll push for a fair settlement, and make sure she doesn't try to take more than she's entitled to. Hearing those words felt like a small victory. For the first time since this whole mess began, I felt like I had a plan, a way forward. Back at the hotel, I started focusing on the little things. I went to the gym, something I hadn't done in years, and began reaching out to friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. Their support was overwhelming, a reminder that I wasn't as alone as I felt. I also picked up a few new hobbies, trying to fill the void Amanda had left behind. Photography had always interested me, so I bought a camera and started experimenting. It wasn't much, but it gave me something to look forward to, a reason to get out of bed in the morning. Meanwhile, Amanda tried to reach out. At first, it was texts, long, rambling messages about how she was sorry and wanted to work things out. "Jake, I know I messed up. Please, let's talk. We can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes." I didn't respond. When the text didn't work, she started calling. I ignored her, letting each call go to voicemail. One day, she left a message that I couldn't ignore. "Jake, if you don't answer, I'm coming to the hotel. We need to talk." Sure enough, a few hours later there was a knock at my door. I debated not answering, but I knew Amanda wouldn't leave until she got what she wanted. I opened the door, and there she was, looking disheveled and teary-eyed. "Jake," she said, her voice cracking. "Can we please just talk?" I stepped aside, letting her in, but kept my distance. "What do you want, Amanda?" I asked, my tone flat. She hesitated, wringing her hands. I need you to understand that I didn't mean to hurt you. I made a mistake, okay? But we can move past this." I laughed bitterly. "A mistake? Amanda, this wasn't a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. This was a choice. A deliberate, calculated choice. And you made it without any regard for me." "I know," she said, her voice trembling. "But I love you, Jake. Doesn't that count for anything?" I stared at her, incredulous. "Love? If this is your idea of love, Amanda, I don't want any part of it." Amanda sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped together, tears streaming down her face. For a fleeting moment, she looked vulnerable, like the woman I once knew. But I couldn't let myself be swayed. "Not this time. You say you love me," I began, my voice steady but sharp. "But every choice you've made says otherwise. You went behind my back. You lied to me, Amanda. You didn't just break my trust, you destroyed it." She sniffled, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I wasn't thinking straight. I got caught up in the idea of the money, Anne. I thought I was doing something good for us. "For us?" I said, letting out a humorless laugh. "Amanda, there's no us when you're sneaking around filming porn behind my back. You didn't do this for us. You did this for you." She flinched at my words but didn't argue. Instead, she shifted gears. "I'll stop," she said quickly, her voice pleading. "I'll delete everything, Jake. I'll never do it again. Just, don't throw this away." "Don't throw this away?" I repeated, staring at her in disbelief. "You're the one who threw it away the second you decided to betray me. You made that choice, Amanda, not me." Her desperation grew. "But it's not too late. We can fix this. Please, Jake, I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything you want." I shook my head. "It's too late for that. You didn't just cross a line, you obliterated it." The room fell silent, her tears falling freely now. But I felt nothing, no pity, no sympathy, just a dull ache in my chest where love used to be. "I'll be filing for divorce," I said firmly, breaking the silence. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. "Divorce?" "Yes," I said. "It's over, Amanda." "No, Jake, you can't mean that," she said, standing up and moving closer to me. "We've been through so much together. You can't just throw it all away." "You keep saying that," I said coldly. "But you're the one who threw it away. And I'm not staying in a marriage built on lies and betrayal." Her panic turned to anger, her tears drying as she glared at me. "Fine," she spat. "If you want to ruin your life over one mistake, that's on you. But don't pretend you're perfect, Jake. You've made your share of mistakes too." "Maybe I have," I replied, my voice calm. "But I never betrayed you. and I sure as hell never humiliated you the way you've humiliated me." She had no response to that. I walked to the door and opened it, gesturing for her to leave. "We're done, Amanda. You need to go." She hesitated, looking at me like she still had something to say. But whatever it was, she kept it to herself. With a huff, she grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. As I stood there in the quiet room, I felt a strange sense of relief. The confrontation was over. The decision was made. I'd drawn the line, and there was no going back. I sat down on the bed, exhaling deeply. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but at least it was my road now. After Amanda left, the silence in the hotel room felt heavy, but for the first time, it wasn't suffocating. I knew the hardest part of this journey was ahead of me, but at least I'd made the decision to move forward. The next morning I called Heather, my divorce lawyer, and explained the latest developments. "She's likely to fight back," Heather said after listening to me recount the confrontation. "People like Amanda don't just walk away quietly. But with the evidence you've described, you're in a strong position. Just be prepared. Divorces involving infidelity can get messy." "I don't care how messy it gets," I said, my voice firm. "I'm done with her, and I want this over with as soon as possible." Heather reassured me she'd start drafting the necessary paperwork and would handle any resistance Amanda might throw our way. Knowing I had someone capable in my corner gave me a sense of relief, even if only a little. In the days that followed, I started putting together everything Heather had asked for: financial records, text messages, and, most painfully, the videos I'd discovered. It was humiliating to dig through that folder, but I knew it was necessary. Each time I saw Amanda's face in those videos, my anger bubbled back to the surface. She hadn't just betrayed me, she desecrated the trust we'd built and demeaned our relationship in ways I couldn't have imagined. I forwarded everything to Heather with a simple note: "Do what you need to do." Meanwhile, Amanda began her campaign to win me back. The texts started pouring in again, alternating between apologies and angry rants. "Jake, I'm so sorry. Please, let's fix this. We can make it work. You're seriously throwing away 4 years because of one mistake? You're unbelievable. I love you, Jake. Don't do this to us." I didn't respond to a single one. When she realized her messages weren't working, she began showing up at the hotel unannounced. The first time, I refused to open the door. "Jake, come on!" she shouted from the hallway. "You can't just ignore me forever." I stayed silent, waiting for her to give up and leave. Eventually she did, but not before slamming her fists against the door and shouting, "You'll regret this!" The second time, I wasn't as patient. I opened the door just enough to glare at her. "What part of we're done do you not understand?" "Jake, please," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I screwed up, but we can fix this. I'll do anything." I stared at her, my resolve unshaken. "If you really wanted to fix this, Amanda, you wouldn't have done it in the first place. Go home. Stop embarrassing yourself." She looked at me like I'd slapped her, but I didn't care. I closed the door in her face and didn't open it again, no matter how long she knocked. That night, I sat in bed, replaying the day in my head. Part of me still felt guilty, like I'd failed as a husband. But then I reminded myself, this wasn't my failure. It was hers. Amanda had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Heather. "Jake, the paperwork is ready. Let me know when you're available to sign and deliver it to Amanda. Once served, we'll start the clock on the process." Seeing those words gave me a strange sense of finality. This was really happening. I was taking the first step toward reclaiming my life. The day I served Amanda the divorce papers was one I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Heather had sent over the final documents, neatly packaged and ready for delivery. All I had to do was hand them to Amanda, or more accurately, drop them on her lap and leave. I didn't trust myself to be calm if I stuck around. She was still living in our house, the same one we'd picked out together. It felt like a lifetime ago, back when I still believed in the future we were building. Now, pulling into the driveway, all I could feel was resentment. Amanda opened the door before I even had the chance to knock. "Jake," she said, her voice soft, almost hopeful. "You're here. Does this mean—" I cut her off, holding up the envelope. "No. It doesn't mean anything except that this is over." Her expression shifted instantly, the hope replaced by anger, as she stared at the papers in my hand. "You're seriously doing this?" "Seriously," I said firmly, shoving the envelope into her hands. She flipped through the pages quickly, her face reddening as she realized what they contained. "You really think you're going to win?" she snapped, her tone venomous. "You think you're the perfect victim here, Jake? You're not exactly blameless." I crossed my arms, keeping my voice steady. "You're right, Amanda. I'm not perfect. But I didn't betray you, lie to you, and sleep with strangers for money." "That's not fair," she shouted, her voice rising. "I was trying to help us. You just couldn't handle the reality of what we needed." "No," I said, my voice calm but cutting. "You were trying to help yourself. And now you're on your own." She looked like she wanted to argue, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned and walked away, ignoring her shouts as I got into my car and drove off. I thought leaving the papers with her would feel like closure, but as I pulled onto the highway, I realized it didn't. Not yet. The anger and hurt were still there, bubbling beneath the surface, and no amount of legal documents could erase them. But at least I'd taken the first step. That evening, Chris came over with a pizza and a six-pack. "How'd it go?" he asked, dropping the food on the coffee table. "About as well as you'd expect," I said, taking a beer. "She yelled, played the victim, tried to make it about me. The usual." Chris laughed, shaking his head. "Man, she's consistent, I'll give her that." "Yeah," I muttered. "It's almost impressive." As we ate, Chris leaned back and studied me. "So, what's next?" "Next?" I said, shrugging. "I don't know. I just want to get through this divorce and move on with my life." "You should think about taking a trip or something," he said. "Get out of town, clear your head. You've been stuck in this mess for too long." He wasn't wrong. My life had revolved around Amanda's betrayal for months, and I needed to break free of it. "Maybe," I said, taking another sip of beer. "I'll think about it." The days following the confrontation were quiet. Amanda's texts became less frequent, and when she did reach out, they were filled with spite instead of apologies. "You're really going to let some lawyer tell you how to live your life? Pathetic. Don't forget, Jake, I'm entitled to half of everything. Don't think you can cut me out completely." Her threats didn't scare me. If anything, they just confirmed I'd made the right decision. Amanda was grasping at straws, desperate to maintain some semblance of control. But I wasn't playing her game anymore. I knew Amanda wouldn't take the divorce lying down, but I wasn't fully prepared for how far she would go. A few days after serving her the papers, I started getting texts from mutual friends, asking questions like, "Jake, what's going on? Amanda's saying some crazy stuff about you." "Hey man, just wanted to check in. Amanda told me about the divorce, sounds messy." It didn't take long for me to figure out what was happening. Amanda was spreading her version of events to anyone who would listen, painting herself as the victim. According to her, I was controlling, emotionally distant, and completely unwilling to compromise. The videos? She claimed I knew about them from the start, and only flipped out because I felt emasculated. It was all lies, of course, but it didn't stop some people from buying into her story. One evening I got a call from a close friend, Josh. "Hey man," he said hesitantly. "Amanda's been saying some stuff about you trying to ruin her life. Is that true?" I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "No, Josh. It's not true. She's just trying to save face because she knows she screwed up." "What happened exactly?" he asked. I hesitated for a moment before deciding to tell him the truth. I explained everything, from Amanda's suggestion that we film an adult video to her decision to go behind my back and do it anyway. I told him about the confrontation, the lies, and her complete lack of remorse. By the time I finished, Josh was silent. "Wow," he said finally. "I had no idea. She made it sound like you were the bad guy." "Yeah, well," I said bitterly. "That's her specialty, twisting the story to make herself look better." The gossip didn't stop there. Amanda began posting cryptic messages on social media, clearly aimed at me. "Some people can't handle a strong woman. Their loss. Funny how the person who claims to love you most can be the one who holds you back the hardest." She even uploaded an old photo of us, captioned, "4 years wasted on someone who never understood me." I didn't respond publicly. I wasn't going to stoop to her level, but the posts infuriated me. It wasn't enough for her to betray me, she had to drag my name through the mud too. Heather called a few days later with an update on the divorce proceedings. "She's contesting the terms," Heather said. "She wants a bigger share of the assets, claiming you were unsupportive and emotionally neglectful." "Of course she does," I muttered. "We'll push back," Heather assured me. "But be prepared for this to get uglier before it gets better." Heather's warning was spot on. Amanda began making demands that were as absurd as they were infuriating. She wanted the house, a significant chunk of my savings, and even the car I'd bought before we were married. "She's just trying to punish you," Chris said when I vented to him about it. "Don't let her win." "I'm not," I said firmly. "She's already taken enough from me. She's not getting anything else." Amid the chaos, I tried to focus on the things I could control. I started spending more time at the gym, channeling my anger and frustration into physical activity. It became my sanctuary, a place where I could clear my mind and remind myself of my own strength. I also threw myself into photography, taking my camera out on long walks and capturing moments of beauty in the world around me. It felt like a way to reclaim my identity, to remind myself that I was more than Amanda's husband, or ex-husband, as I would soon be. One afternoon, while I was editing some photos at a coffee shop, Sarah, the barista I'd seen a few times, struck up a conversation. "You've been coming here a lot lately," she said, smiling warmly. "Yeah," I said, looking up. "Needed a change of scenery." She glanced at my laptop. "Photography?" I nodded. "It's a hobby. Something to keep me sane." "Well, you've got a good eye," she said, pointing at one of the pictures on my screen. Her compliment caught me off guard, but it felt genuine. It had been so long since someone had noticed me for who I was, not for the drama surrounding my marriage. "Thanks," I said, smiling for what felt like the first time in weeks. That night, as I sat in my quiet hotel room, I thought about Sarah's words. It was a small moment, but it reminded me that life was still happening around me, and that I didn't have to let Amanda's chaos define my future. Amanda's attempts to drag me through the mud weren't working as well as she'd hoped. While a few people bought into her narrative, most of my friends and family saw through the lies. Josh even sent me a screenshot of a group chat where people were calling her out. "She's just bitter because Jake's done with her nonsense. Honestly, the stuff she's posting is embarrassing. She should stop before it gets worse." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't fighting this battle alone. Despite Amanda's backlash, I stayed focused on moving forward. Heather kept me updated on the divorce proceedings, and while Amanda's demands were ridiculous, my lawyer's calm confidence kept me grounded. "She's stalling," Heather said during one of our calls. "Her claims don't hold water, and she knows it. We'll push for a resolution soon." "Good," I replied. "The sooner this is over, the better." One evening, while I was out taking photos, I stumbled upon a small park I'd never noticed before. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the trees and the water fountain in the center. It was the kind of scene I used to overlook in the chaos of my old life, but now, it felt like a reminder of the beauty that still existed, even amid the mess. As I adjusted my camera, I noticed a woman sitting on a nearby bench, reading a book. It was Sarah, the barista from the coffee shop. "Fancy seeing you here," I said, approaching her with a smile. She looked up, surprised but pleased. "Hey, out capturing the sunset?" "Something like that," I replied, gesturing to the fountain. This place is a hidden gem. She nodded, closing her book. It's one of my favorite spots. Perfect for clearing your head. We ended up talking for over an hour, sharing stories about our favorite places in the city and the little things that brought us joy. Have you ever thought about showcasing your work? She asked at one point. Not really, I admitted. It's just a hobby for now. Well, you're good at it, she said sincerely. You should think about putting it out there. Her encouragement stuck with me long after we parted ways. That night, I found myself revisiting some of my older photos, the ones I'd taken before my marriage fell apart. They felt like glimpses of a different person, someone who still believed in love, trust, and stability. I wasn't that person anymore, but that wasn't a bad thing. I'd grown. I'd learned. And now, I was ready to rebuild. A few days later, I took Sarah's advice and submitted some of my photos to a local art exhibit. It was a small step, but it felt significant. When I got the email saying one of my pieces had been selected, I couldn't stop smiling. It wasn't just about the photo. It was about reclaiming a part of myself that Amanda had tried to take away. Meanwhile, Amanda's antics were starting to fizzle out. Her social media posts grew less frequent, and the texts stopped altogether. Heather confirmed that she'd finally agreed to the divorce terms, likely realizing she didn't have a leg to stand on. She's signing the papers this week, Heather said during our next call. Once that's done, we'll finalize everything. Hearing those words felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. The end was finally in sight. That weekend I went back to the park where I'd run into Sarah. I didn't expect to see her again, but part of me hoped I would. Sure enough, she was there, sitting on the same bench with a cup of coffee and a book. Twice in 1 week, I said, approaching her with a grin. She laughed, closing her book. I'm starting to think you're following me. Or maybe we both just have good taste in spots, I replied, sitting down beside her. Our conversation picked up right where it had left off, easy and natural. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was connecting with someone without the baggage of my past weighing me down. As I walked home that evening, I realized something. Amanda's betrayal had broken me, but it hadn't destroyed me. I was still here, still standing, still capable of finding joy and meaning in the world. And that, I decided, was the best revenge I could ask for. With Amanda finally agreeing to the divorce terms, the chaos she'd brought into my life began to settle. For months she'd dominated my thoughts, her lies, her betrayal, her audacity to play the victim. But now, for the first time, she felt like a shadow fading into the background. When Heather called to confirm that the papers had been signed and filed, it felt surreal. It's official, she said. You're no longer tied to her. Congratulations, Jake. I thanked her, but as I hung up, a strange mix of emotions washed over me. Relief, definitely. But also sadness for the life I thought I'd have and anger at how easily she'd thrown it all away. To mark the occasion, Chris insisted we go out. This calls for a celebration, he said, dragging me to our favorite bar. You're finally free, man. No more lies, no more drama. Just you and a fresh start. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again. You know, Chris said, leaning back in his chair, you handled this whole thing way better than I would have. If it were me, I'd still be trying to claw my way out of the mess. I laughed, shaking my head. Trust me, it wasn't easy. There were days when I didn't think I'd make it through. But you did, he said firmly. And now? You get to figure out what's next. The what's next turned out to be more fulfilling than I'd imagined. My photography was gaining traction, small exhibitions here and there, a few paid gigs, and even a feature in a local magazine. It wasn't enough to quit my day job, but it gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Sarah had become a steady presence in my life, too. We weren't rushing into anything serious, but our connection felt real and refreshing. She didn't bring drama or manipulation, just honesty and kindness. One weekend, Sarah invited me to a farmer's market downtown. You'll love it, she said, her enthusiasm contagious. Great food, live music, and plenty of photo ops. She wasn't wrong. The market was a vibrant mix of colors, sounds, and energy. We wandered through the stalls, stopping to sample fresh bread and admire handmade crafts. At one point, she stopped in front of a small art booth displaying local photography. "You should do something like this," she said, gesturing to the prints. "Maybe someday," I replied, smiling. "No," she said, turning to face me. "Not someday. Soon. You're good enough, Jake. You just need to believe it." Her words struck a chord. For so long, I doubted myself, letting Amanda's betrayal chip away at my confidence. But Sarah's unwavering belief in me was starting to change that. That night, as I looked through the photos I'd taken at the market, I felt a sense of pride I hadn't experienced in a long time. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. Amanda's betrayal had been a turning point, a catalyst for the hardest chapter of my life. But it had also forced me to grow, to reassess my priorities, and to rebuild myself from the ground up. I didn't just survive her betrayal. I overcame it. As the weeks went by, I noticed something unexpected. The bitterness I'd felt toward Amanda was fading. It wasn't forgiveness, not in the way she might have wanted, but a sense of detachment. She no longer had the power to hurt me. Filing the divorce papers had been a tangible end to our marriage, but the emotional closure came in quieter moments, like when I edited my photos late at night or shared easy conversations with Sarah. Each small step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. One afternoon, I decided to tackle the last box I'd brought from the house. For weeks, it had been sitting in the corner of my hotel room, gathering dust. Inside, I found remnants of my old life: wedding photos, anniversary cards, small mementos Amanda and I had collected over the years. I flipped through the photos with a strange sense of detachment. In one, Amanda and I were smiling at the camera during our honeymoon. In another, we were standing in front of the house we'd bought together, looking so proud and full of hope. But instead of sadness, I felt a sense of clarity. Those memories were from a different time, with a different version of Amanda. The person she'd become wasn't the woman I'd married. I packed everything back into the box and taped it shut. I didn't need those reminders anymore. With Amanda behind me, I threw myself into my photography with more focus than ever. Sarah had been right. I needed to stop waiting for someday and start taking chances now. I submitted my work to more galleries, entered competitions, and even started an online portfolio. To my surprise, the response was overwhelmingly positive. "You're building something amazing," Sarah said one evening as we reviewed my latest set of photos. "You should be proud of yourself." I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't experienced in years. "I couldn't have done it without you," I admitted. Our connection continued to grow, but what I appreciated most about Sarah was her patience. She didn't push me to rush into anything, didn't demand more than I was ready to give. One night, as we sat on the back porch of her apartment, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, she asked, "Do you ever think about the future?" "All the time," I replied, staring out at the skyline. "And?" she prompted, her tone light but curious. I glanced at her, taking in the way her face softened in the moonlight. "For the first time in a long while," I said, "I'm actually excited about it." Just as I was settling into my new life, Amanda resurfaced one last time. It happened on a Friday afternoon, when I was heading back to my hotel after a day of shooting photos at a nearby park. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello? Jake." Her voice was unmistakable. "Amanda." I sighed, already regretting picking up. "What do you want, Amanda?" "Can we talk?" she asked, her tone softer than I remembered. "In person?" "Why?" I asked flatly. I need to explain some things," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Please, Jake. It'll just take a few minutes." I wanted to say no, to hang up and block the number. But part of me was curious. What could she possibly have to say after everything? "Fine," I said reluctantly. One meeting. That's it. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop near the hotel. I got there early, hoping to get it over with as quickly as possible. When Amanda walked in, I was struck by how different she looked. She seemed smaller, almost deflated, like the confidence she'd once carried had vanished. "Jake," she said, sitting across from me. I didn't respond, just waited for her to speak. She fidgeted with the edge of her sweater, her eyes darting nervously around the room. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she began. "For everything." I raised an eyebrow. "For everything? That's a lot to cover." Her shoulders sagged. "I know. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I need you to understand. I didn't mean to lose you, Jake." Her words might have meant something months ago, but now they felt hollow. "You didn't mean to lose me?" I repeated, my tone sharp. "You didn't mean to betray me, lie to me, humiliate me? Because that's what you did, Amanda. Over and over again." "I was stupid," she said, her voice breaking. "I was desperate, Jake. I thought if I made enough money, if I showed you I could contribute, things would get better." I shook my head, leaning back in my chair. "You don't fix a marriage by tearing it apart. You don't prove your worth by lying and cheating." She looked down at her hands, silent for a moment. Then she said, "I miss you." Those words hit me differently than I expected. Not because they stirred anything inside me, far from it, but because they made me realize just how much I didn't miss her. "I don't miss you," I said calmly. "What I miss is the person I thought you were. But that person doesn't exist, Amanda." Maybe she never did. Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I wish I could go back," she whispered. "I wish I could fix it. It's too late for that," I said firmly. "I've moved on. And you should too." When I left the coffee shop, I felt lighter, like I'd finally closed a door I didn't even realize was still open. Amanda's apology didn't change anything for me, but it gave me a sense of closure I hadn't expected. I was done with her, completely, finally, and entirely. And for the first time in years I felt free. Walking out of that coffee shop felt like stepping into a new phase of my life. Amanda's apology, as hollow as it felt, was the final piece I needed to close that chapter for good. The next day, I woke up feeling different, lighter, freer. There was no lingering bitterness, no gnawing thoughts about what could have been. I was done letting her mistakes define me. I started focusing even more on building a life that felt entirely mine. The small successes in my photography began to snowball. I got more invitations to exhibit my work and even had a few local businesses reach out to buy prints for their offices. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally doing something that mattered. Sarah was there through it all, her steady encouragement keeping me grounded. We spent more and more time together, but our relationship never felt rushed or forced. She didn't push me to be anything other than who I was, and for that, I was grateful. One weekend, she invited me to join her at a friend's cabin for a small getaway. "It'll be fun," she said, her enthusiasm infectious. "Quiet, peaceful. Just what you need." We spent the weekend hiking, cooking together, and talking late into the night. On the last evening, as we sat by the fire pit, she turned to me and asked, "Do you ever think about where you'll be a year from now?" "All the time," I admitted. "And?" she prompted. I stared into the flames, thinking about her question. For so long, the future had been a terrifying unknown, overshadowed by the wreckage of my marriage. But now, for the first time, I didn't feel scared. "I think I'll be happy," I said finally, glancing at her. She smiled, her eyes soft. "I think so too." Back in the city, life continued to pick up momentum. I started teaching a beginner photography class at a community center, something I never imagined I'd have the confidence to do. Sharing my passion with others reminded me of how far I'd come, how I'd taken something that started as an escape and turned it into a source of pride. One evening after class, I got an email from the editor of a local magazine. "We've seen your work and love your perspective. Would you be interested in contributing to an upcoming issue? I stared at the screen, hardly able to believe what I was reading. A year ago, I'd been drowning in the chaos of Amanda's betrayal. Now I was being asked to share my voice with the world. I replied with an enthusiastic yes. That night, I told Sarah about the opportunity. I knew it, she said, her excitement infectious. I knew people would see how talented you are. Her belief in me never wavered, and that belief made me want to be better, not just for myself, but for her too. As the weeks turned into months, my old life with Amanda felt like a distant memory. She had faded into the background, no longer a looming presence in my mind. Occasionally, I'd hear about her from mutual acquaintances, but I never felt the urge to dig deeper. I had everything I needed right here in the present. Time has a funny way of moving. One day you're drowning in heartbreak, and the next, you're wondering how you ever let it consume you. That's where I found myself months after Amanda's final apology. Her betrayal had left scars, no doubt, but they were no longer raw. They were reminders of what I'd been through and how far I'd come. The magazine feature I'd agreed to write turned into something much bigger than I anticipated. What started as a small contribution blossomed into a full feature spread, showcasing not just my photography but my personal story of rediscovery. The editor loved my idea of pairing each photo with a short narrative about the moment it was captured. It makes your work feel intimate, she said during one of our calls. It's not just about the image, it's about the life behind it. When the issue was published, I was overwhelmed by the response. Friends, family, and even strangers reached out to tell me how much they connected with my work. It wasn't about fame or recognition, it was about finding purpose in something I was passionate about. Sarah and I continued to grow closer. She became my confidant, my support system, and my partner in ways I never expected. One evening, as we sat on her balcony, watching the sun set over the city, she turned to me and said, "You're not the same person you were when we first met." "Good or bad?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Good," she said, smiling softly. "You've let go of so much, Jake. It's inspiring to see." Her words meant more to me than I could express. The life I was building felt entirely new, unburdened by the weight of my past. The friends I surrounded myself with, the work I was doing, and the relationship I was nurturing with Sarah, it all felt authentic and meaningful. Even Max, my loyal golden retriever, seemed to thrive in this new chapter of life. He'd become my constant companion during my photography outings, his energy and enthusiasm a reminder to appreciate the simple things. One afternoon, as I was teaching my photography class, a student asked, "What made you start taking pictures?" The question caught me off guard. For a moment, I thought about Amanda, how photography had been my escape from the pain she caused. But as I looked around the room, at the eager faces of people learning something new, I realized the answer was more than that. "It started as a way to clear my head," I said honestly. "But now, it's about seeing the world differently. Finding beauty in unexpected places. It's funny how life has a way of surprising you. A year ago, I thought my world had ended. I was drowning in Amanda's betrayal, struggling to find a way forward. Now, as I look around at the life I've built, I can hardly recognize the man I used to be. Amanda is nothing more than a memory now. Occasionally, her name pops up in conversation or I catch wind of some update about her life through mutual acquaintances. But it doesn't faze me anymore. She's a chapter I've closed, and I have no intention of rereading it. My photography has grown beyond anything I imagined. The magazine feature led to new opportunities, gallery showcases, more paid gigs, and even collaborations with other local artists. People began reaching out to me for portraits, weddings, and personal projects. It wasn't just a hobby anymore, it was a career. One day, as I was setting up for a shoot, I caught myself smiling. Not the forced smile I'd worn during the darker days, but a genuine expression of joy. I was doing something I loved, something that felt completely mine. Sarah became an integral part of my life. Her quiet confidence and unwavering support were exactly what I needed to keep moving forward. We weren't in a rush to define our relationship, we didn't need to be. One evening, as we cooked dinner together in her apartment, she looked at me and said, "You seem happy." "I am," I replied, meeting her gaze. "Happier than I've been in years." She smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "You deserve it, Jake." The moments with Sarah felt effortless. There were no games, no manipulations, no secrets. Just two people enjoying each other's company and supporting each other's dreams. On the anniversary of the day I served Amanda the divorce papers, Sarah surprised me with a framed print of one of my photos from the magazine feature. "I thought this deserved a place on your wall," she said with a smile. I hung it in my living room that night, a reminder of how far I'd come. One weekend, Sarah and I took a trip to the coast, a place I hadn't been in years. We spent hours walking along the beach, Max bounding through the waves with boundless energy. As we sat on the sand, watching the sunset, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Looking back, Amanda's betrayal was the catalyst that forced me to reevaluate everything. It shattered me, yes, but it also pushed me to rebuild myself into someone stronger, someone who could find beauty in the aftermath of chaos. I don't hate her anymore. I don't feel much of anything for her at all. What I do feel is gratitude, for the lessons I learned, for the strength I found, and for the life I've created since then. As the waves crashed against the shore and Sarah rested her head on my shoulder, I thought about the future. It wasn't a blank canvas anymore, it was a masterpiece in progress. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see how it would turn out.